By the way, incredible at commentating games.
Oh, yeah.
Launching a podcast network called Audiorama. Here we go. The first episode of his podcast, the premier podcast of the Audiorama Podcast Network, Youth Inc. Absolute superstar, Captain America, future Hall of Famer, ladies and gentlemen, Greg Olsen.
So, man, I feel like this is a long time coming. I saw you outside the Super Bowl. I was like, how do you never ask me to come on your show? I see all these other guys coming on your show. I was starting to feel a little left out.
Greg, I don't want to get into it because I like you a lot. But tight end you guys did interviews with every fucking person that spoke into a microphone except for us.
Is that what it was? Is that where this starts?
Yeah. And I am a spiteful person. You know this. I saw.
Let's flush this out. Let's flush it out.
What happened? Literally every single show that exists. Go ahead.
I remember, didn't we DM each other through Instagram?
Yes. And like, hey, tight end you, come on the show. You're like, you got it.
I'm pulling it up right now. Because I feel like I left you the last message.
The last message was 2 days after you guys were on every other show. It's like, I'm not interviewing this guy after he's been on every single show.
So as long as we've established that I last said, yeah, man, would love to come on, and then you ghosted me. As long as we establish that's how the communication ended, I think we can move forward in a good way.
Greg, I was not happy. I was so mad because I was like, man, these dudes are doing interviews with literally, you guys were doing podcasts that I think got like 15, 20 downloads to promote this tight end university, and we couldn't even get a sniff.
Nope.
Travis, Kittle, Greg, everybody around the league, you guys are everywhere, and we can't even get a sniff. I'm like, I thought we were friends. But anyway,
should we give you when we're doing it again this year? We haven't started, so don't get sensitive. We haven't started.
Don't want to hear it. Don't care. Don't care. The O-lineman invited me down to their thing. I'm on the O-line, you dude. Okay, I'm with the big boys.
Man. You're missing out.
No, that is you were.
How's your pass set?
Greg, have you seen this?
I saw you try to pass set the kid from Michigan.
Yeah, I thought you almost
fell off the stage.
Washed him down.
No, Greg, no. We 30 yards.
Yeah.
He went around.
He went too far. He didn't run the hoop.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he did run the hoop, but we were coming right inside there. So I
thought you looked great.
Thank you, Greg. Not as good as you. Let's talk about this, though, for real. You are an awesome human being. You were a part of my retirement press conference. Killed it. I think immediately upon that day, it was our first time meeting you. It was like, oh, this guy's handsome, athletic, massive, funny, charming, smart. Like, oh, this guy's going to be able to do whatever the hell he wants when he retires. Now we're watching you commentate. You're launching a podcast network. I'm so incredibly happy for you, Greg, that you're just crushing this life in retirement.
Well, right back at you, man. I'll tell you, you're one of the few shows, and I mean this genuinely, and I told you this at the Super Bowl. I consume pretty much on a daily basis a good percentage of your show. I love the interviews. I told you the other day, it just seems like the people that come on your show genuinely enjoy it. I saw the Vince McMahon thing like last week with the WrestleMania. My kids, by the way, love SmackDown. Like, it's a huge deal. My daughter, who's 9, is obsessed with it. So we'll be watching you in WrestleMania and all that. So I just think your show is awesome. I love coming on it. I think you guys have a great time, you and your buddies. It's definitely a show that I think a lot of people entering this field try to emulate and try to follow. And I remember that press conference well, man. I asked you a question. You told me to go fuck myself.
That was a part of it, though. That was part of it.
It was all part of the bit. Yeah, it was all. I think people watching that. I actually had someone the day you guys announced your big announcement a couple weeks ago with FanDuel and whatnot. I had people like reminiscing about your retirement, and they're like, "This is why McAfee never has you on. He hates you." I was like, "Guys, you realize that was all like part of it."
Yeah.
I'll tell you, people take that shit serious, but that was fun. Rappaport walked in. He was in the wrong press conference. That was a good day. That was a lot of fun to be a part of.
Well, we were very lucky that you were a part of it. And by the way, your acting was so good.
Oh, yeah. Top tier.
You still got people years later saying, oh, it was that day.
It's McAfee.
Oh, my God. Greg, let's talk about you a little bit. Obviously, the podcast is out today. 2 episodes, Jerry Rice and Michael Gervais, who I don't know Michael Gervais, but I believe Youth Inc., the podcast that you're launching through the Audiorama Network, which you have founded alongside Vince Vaughn, Ryan Khalil, and Mikey Fowler. You're talking about youth sports. What is this? You have kids, obviously, very documented. Your fatherhood is... You're dad of the year, dude. Always have been. But what is it? You hate the modern sports, the world? What is it about, you think, that is kind of the whole podcast?
Yeah, there's really not a hate to it. So really the creation of it was, for anyone who's kind of living in this world of youth sports and trying to figure out the amount of decisions that parents have to make on a daily basis, something as simple as what equipment to use, what league to sign up for, but then also just trying to figure out, how many sports a season does your kid play? Well, what if the kid down the street's only playing baseball? Should your kid only be playing baseball? Should it be traveling? What's too much? How do you, then there's like the whole parenting aspect of it, how hard to push your child, when is enough, and my wife and I were living this, and as you said, I grew up in this world. My dad was my high school football coach for 40 years. He was like the old school, in your face, tough high school football guy, stereotypical. And I harbored a lot of that and really carried a lot of those lessons with me. And it was a big part of my career. And now I'm a parent, right? Now I'm coaching youth teams, baseball teams. We're coaching flag football and whatnot. And I'm like laying up at night, dude, stressing out about how to get Johnny to put the ball in play. And this parent doesn't like which position his kid's playing. And it's just, I lay in bed, I say to my wife, I'm like, if I don't know how to do this, who does? I've spent my whole life in this. And from those conversations, we're like, there's a journey here that we can take and bring viewers along with us and show the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, and just go out and get these unique perspectives. You brought up Michael Gervais. So Michael Gervais is a world-renowned sports psychologist. He was episode number 1. I met him personally. He works very closely with the Seahawks and Russ and Pete and those guys. And just his perspective to kick this show off, the conversation was fascinating, made me like reevaluate my entire approach to my life. And it was like I was in like a shrink session.
You're in therapy.
It was wild. So it's a really cool thing. We partnered with Invisalign. We have a shared real passion to kind of target youth sports and really uncover this ever-changing landscape. And it's been a lot of fun. We've been working on Audiorama, the parent company with Vince and Ryan, for well over a year. And we've got a really cool team together. And we're expecting to hopefully people catch on and enjoy what we're doing.
Hey, congrats, man.
Yeah. Appreciate
awesome.
that. Appreciate it.
I'm not a father yet. Hopefully one day I'll be lucky enough to, but I see the internet and, youth sports is wide. I mean, it seems like it's insane. AJ Hawk, who's normally with us, he's coaching all of his kids. He's coaching his daughter, and he talks about how some of these parents are just absurd. And I assume this has always been the case, but now with social media spotlighting it and gaslighting it and making people probably feel like it's okay to act like an ass more often, it's insane. I'm very thankful that you're going through this. You're probably going to change a lot of people's lives, which is awesome. Well, did you know you were going to be a good podcast host? Like you said, you talked to Michael Gervais, and it felt like it was a therapy session. That's what you're aiming for in every podcast, every conversation you get lost in, right? I mean, that's literally what you're looking for.
Absolutely. And the hope was, the first episode was Gervais, and then the second episode was Jerry Rice. We had a chance to meet him shortly after I saw you at Super Bowl Experience. What's that?
How was Jerry? He was not good on our show. He did not I don't think he had any respect for me at all.
It was cool. The really cool thing about Jerry was we got to obviously reflect about, his childhood and his introduction to football, and his parents didn't let him play football. It was his high school principal that saw him cutting class, running out of the back door, brought him in and was like, we got to get you involved in something. His mom finally relented and let him play. Of course, his career speaks for itself. But then he watched his kids. He had 2 sons that both were recruited. His one son just transferred in the portal to USC with them over there.
Lincoln Riley, yeah.
With Lane. Riley.
Yeah.
And so just him going through it with the NIL and what that perspective was like, and I asked him, I said, Jerry, if I'm your kid's high school coach, can I coach your kid to play wide receiver? Yeah. How do I coach Jerry Rice's kid? And then at night he goes home and he tells his dad, hey, Coach Olsen told me I'm stepping with the wrong foot. And Jerry Rice is like, hey, tell Coach Olsen to call me. You know what I mean? It was a really cool conversation. So it was a really unique perspective. We got some other really cool. I'm actually interviewing Sean Johnson, the gold medalist Olympian. Gymnastics is a really different animal now for young kids and what that commitment's like.
Those documentaries are wild over there. Those are early hours, hard hours too. I mean, that's hard.
That's real now. They think we take flag football serious. These parents have no idea until you step foot in a gymnastics gym. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation. We're going to tackle it from all different sides. And I think people will come away with things that apply to them personally. And then they can make the best decision for their child. And that's all we're looking to do is be that resource.
The podcast is called Youth Inc. It is out now. Michael Gervais, sports psychologist, and Jerry Rice available. Let's talk about Michael Gervais. You said I think Russell Wilson also scheduled to be a guest on there. He's the newest member of the Denver Broncos. 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, a 5th, and 3 players. And people are saying that Seattle won that won that trade. Russell Wilson, if you can get him on your team, you get him on your team? What was he like as a teammate? What was he like as a human? How would you describe Russell Wilson? Because from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, this guy seems to portray the perfect person all the time. Hey, clear eyes, full hearts, here we go. His mic'd ups are like out of a movie. Greg, they're out of a movie almost. I'm like, I've never met somebody like this. You got to be teammates with him. You know him very well. When I saw you outside of Radio Row, I met Russell Wilson for the first time. He gave you a big hug, a lot of love there. What do you think Denver's getting, and how do you feel about the trade as a whole?
Yeah, I think the notion that Seattle won that trade is a bit interesting. I think
you could say it.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think they got a couple players in the trade. Really, the 2 first rounders were what moves the needle. But to give away 2 first rounders, that you hope that those first rounders aren't that high, right? Into the future, trading picks is all based on how good do you think you're going to be, right? So to trade a first round pick this year, you can't obviously control. But for the following years, if you have Russell Wilson on your team, you're hoping you're not picking until the later third at the minimum, but you're hoping you're a playoff team and you're picking in the late 20s, early 30, 31, whatever. And you're not worried about it. To give up that future pick in the first round and then the subsequent, the way it falls in the following rounds to get Russell, right? And that when we called their game when they beat the Cowboys this year, and no one expected them to go in there, and they beat the brakes off the Cowboys. And we thought going in that the quarterbacks, they were an elite quarterback away from having the pieces offensively, defensively. They got weapons. The defense played really well. So to add Russell to that mix and give up 2 guys, the defensive lineman Harris, I think, is a good player. But the 2 offensive guys, Noah Fant was not really doing a ton in the offense. Obviously, the quarterback.
He's bummed. Noah's bummed.
Yeah. So, I don't know if they gave up a ton of people. Yeah, they gave up draft capital, but who knows? Those picks could have been busts anyway.
Yeah, and
so you get a foregone. I mean, look what LA did. They don't have a first-round pick. Yeah, but they got Jalen Ramsey. They got Matt Stafford. They're getting real dudes.
Greg, Tampa, Denver with Peyton, Matt Stafford, now Russ. I mean, it's just like, it feels like all these other elite quarterbacks. It's going to be hard not to look around and be like, well, if I leave, even though I love this place, which I think Russ just put out a tweet to Seattle, forever grateful for Seattle. I'm sure he has a lot of love. His restaurants he goes to up there, the people he knows, his neighbors, whatever. Actually, that compound, he probably got no neighbors. No. But whatever the case, he's got a lot of love for Seattle. Yeah. But he knows that the blueprint has been laid. If you go to a new place and they kind of just give you the keys, which I think they're going to do in Denver, hey, Russ, him and Nathaniel Hackett are probably going to have a great relationship, is how Aaron described it. He's going to have massive success. Now, that's a tough division. Is that something that any quarterback would ever think about? Like, Greg, I said this yesterday. Those quarterbacks at that level, and people are talking about Aaron staying in the NFC, smart, hard road through the AFC or whatever. It's like Aaron doesn't give a damn about that. Russell going in the AFC West. Russell's like, they're in my division now, right? Like that is, I don't think the separation between how fans and pundits view that versus how these quarterbacks view it is vastly different, I think. Am I wrong in thinking that, you think, Greg?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. I think from the outside, the reality is, yes, the hard division does change your ability to win it. It does change your ability to get a higher seed, home field potentially is the number 1, or however that works. Yes, on the outside looking in, that's all real. Internally, guys like Russ, guys that just really operate at that high level. I know you guys have Aaron on a lot, similar mindset. Those guys are not sitting around saying, I'm going to dodge this team, I'm going to dodge this division. They don't process things like that. They approach every situation that you have to worry about me, right? I'm coming into your division, so now you have to be on notice, right? LA, and they don't view things the other way around, and that's like the true competitive spirit that a lot of these really unique guys have. And you asked about what Russ was like, and I know the mic'd up stuff sometimes almost sounds scripted, but I can tell you from firsthand experience, whether it was a Zoom call during the pandemic in March when I first signed there, and he's like texting me, I'm on spring break at the pool in Orlando, and I'm like, hey, dude, I'm on spring break. He's like, in an hour, I'm going to have a Zoom link sent to you, my assistant. And I'm like, all right, we're like going over the playbook. Whether it was March or whether it was the day before the wild card round of the playoffs before we lost to the Rams, he's the same guy every single day. And it's almost hard to believe that like someone could be that routine and like be that consistent, but he really is. And it's probably the best compliment that I could pay him. Yeah. Is there's no such thing as like this is less important than this. He doesn't operate like that. His brain just doesn't function at that level. And he's just a really, really fascinating and a really driven and motivated and consistent personality. And then, of course, the physical tools on the field, everyone can see that clearly.
So good at the football. I mean, he should have been starting for the Yankees.
Yep.
Yankees stink.
Yeah,
They probably should have signed him
Yeah.
actually
Baseball.
last year. But whenever that was my first time meeting him in person outside Radio Row when you were out there. That was and I literally said to him, I'm like, hey, Russ, man, massive respect, dude. Obviously, I thought you were like a movie character, but then everybody says you're the same person all the time. And he was like, oh, I appreciate that, man. Like that, he was like super cool. I said, I'm gonna send a request at some point for you to come on the show. Feel free to tell me to go fuck myself.
I heard you say that. I walked away. I was laughing my ass off. I was like, that was such a pro move by McAfee. I was like, he did the sly, like, hey, I'm gonna ask you. But seriously, dude, say no. It's not a big deal. Like, it was such a good backhanded. It was very well hedged.
Whoa, no, I wanted him to know.
It was very well hedged.
Thank you. I felt pretty good about it.
Because now if he does turn you down, he's like, yeah, I told him to. It's fine. I told him.
Bingo. Yeah, well, I'm not going to tell anybody when we send a request, so nobody's going to know. Like, we are not going to publicize that. But him on on the Manning cast was awesome. I mean, I feel like I have really developed, because it's hard to believe that he's a real human. And I think, like, in the NFL, in the locker room, especially a quarterback, like, that's a position where the team has to rally around and believe, and, like, you have to be the guy. That's how the NFL, we know it. We all know it. I was very lucky to be a part of some great teams that had incredible quarterbacks. But every time I heard him mic'd up, I'm like, I would like to see, like, some of my friends deal with this guy doing, like, the movie quotes almost. And if he's like that every single day, people have to fucking love being around him, because that's an energy that you can't get. Let's talk about you for a second before the boys have their questions. And we're talking to Greg Olsen. His podcast, Youth Inc., is available right now, 2 episodes. Debut podcast for Voice-O-Rama?
Audio-Rama.
Audio-Rama. Shit.
Should we cut?
I didn't want to kill your brand there. I mean,
it's all good, man. We're back. We're good. We're very resilient. We're resilient. I'll just tell Vince Vaughn was like, hey, tell McAfee I'll come on. I'm gonna text him and be like, nah, dude, you got it wrong. Maybe next year.
Hey, Vince Vaughn, huh? Maybe me and him get into a little, hey, huh?
What would you guys do?
And take the
What would you do?
I don't know. I have no idea. I would just ask him to just go on a rant so that I could chime in, so that I just hear where he gets going, because it feels like he is
an all-timer.
Oh, that's what I've heard. And his brain is almost on display in these movies. They're like, that's not scripted. That's just Vince Vaughn doing Vince Vaughn right there.
He's a genius.
How'd you meet him?
We lived in Chicago. We actually met, 15 years ago when I was living in Chicago. He was living in Chicago. And we just struck up a friendship and, kind of hung out there and got to know him and his wife. And just all these years later, they live by each other. Him and Khalil live out in Manhattan Beach, live in the Hollywood life out there. Khalil's got a production company that he's producing some Apple shows right now. He's got White Man Can't Jump in the thing. I mean, he's doing, him and Blake Griffin are partners in a production group out there. So him and Vince have gotten to be really close. So the three of us were just kind of sitting around. We were having dinner out in Manhattan Beach last spring or so, and just started kicking around this idea I had about You Think. And from there we said, why would we go out and offer this to another platform? Let's just build something around it, a great team around it, own it, and then accumulate and build out other really interesting content. So that's kind of the genesis of Audio-Rama, and why we decided to just kind of go out and do it on our own.
By the way, I like that. I like that a lot. Don't let anybody else.
You get it.
Yeah, I love it. I don't just like it. I absolutely love it. But let's talk about what you do for other people, because Fox is very lucky that you are a commentator, okay? And I am somebody that I watch the games, and I want to hear what the commentators are saying, because commentators get access to conversations that nobody else gets. So my studying for The Daily Show is almost listening to the commentators, because they have those interactions the night before. What little piece of information can drop out of that I can use for the show? You are unbelievable in there. I want to let you know that. I assume a lot of people tell you that. There's a lot of harsh critics for commentating for the NFL, for the biggest league in the world. You're so good. Did you know you were going to be good? Did you practice? Was it just like a fish to water when you got in the booth? And what do you think it's because of? Just your experience and how laid back you are? You crush it in there, man. Honestly.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll tell you a really cool moment. Again, I watch your show obviously a lot, especially with Rodgers. When you and Rodgers did talk about it, and he actually without being prompted, that was a shout out to McAfee.
Hey, we got big respect for you.
It was a good leading question. I know that's why you asked him.
Well, absolutely, man. Come on, you got to throw the alley-oop up there.
But no, I was fortunate. Back in 2017. I did a long time ago, back in 14, 15, Fox had me out. I was in California, actually visiting Khalil for the summer. Went in, did a mock game in the studio for the executives and some of the people there. you just call a playoff game from the year before. So I went in and did that as like a rehearsal. They thought it went well. So then 2017 on my bye week, they asked me a few weeks before, they're like, hey, would you want to call a game? We'll put you in a 3-man booth with Charles Davis and Kevin Burkhardt, who I've known for a long time. He did my rehearsal. He's, obviously he's my partner now. And so the three of us did a 3-man booth for a game back in 2017. Really enjoyed it. Then 2019, they said, hey, we'd love to have you back and do it again on your bye, but we want to see you in a 2-man booth. So I did it with Kenny Albert, and that went really well too. So, towards the last couple of years, we had some conversations from some of the Thursday night football stuff, and some of them, I auditioned for the Monday night job before they gave it to Witten. So there was conversations there between like 17 and 19 where we were kind of in the mix for a couple of those openings, didn't get any of them, continued to play, and then signed my deal with them knowing my last year in Seattle was going to be my last year. I actually signed my deal with Fox before that. So I was fortunate that they gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of dip my toe in the water and do some live action of NFL games and see if I liked it, see if I thought I could kind of take to it. And then they, to their credit, they just put me with Burkhardt, who's as good as anybody in the business. My producer and director have called Super Bowls. I mean, Pam Oliver. So they put me with real high-level people where I could just get in there, talk ball, do my thing, and then they could kind of put out all the fires and do all this special TV stuff and kind of just hold my hand through that. So it was a good combination of a team and kind of a good combination of them kind of bringing me along and giving me opportunities and not just throwing me to the wolves day one this season and go, hey, figure it out. So it was a good process, and I've really enjoyed it. The part you talked about with the production meetings is like my favorite part.
Yeah, it's the best. Honestly, I've only got to call one NFL game. It was the Packers-Lions. But
you had the best moment of all time.
Hey, that fake field goal was pretty sweet.
That was amazing. It was so fitting. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Hey, by the way, I think they did run it because I was there, too.
Of course they did. They know. They're playing to their audience. Come on, man.
Smart. I mean, it was 35-0, week 17, no playoffs on the line. Aaron Rodgers got hurt play 2. I mean, it was.
Yeah, but you crushed that. That moment, you were made for that moment.
Ooh, that feels good. But they're lucky that they have you. I want to let you know that. They're lucky that they have you because we have a lot of TVs. I try to watch as many games as possible. It's like the only research I have to do is watch these games. It's all there if you just want to watch it and learn. And there's a lot of dudes in those booths that are terrible. And you don't have to say that because you're in the business, but I will. That you are a breath of joy and a welcomed person into the NFL community in the booth. The fact that we could have had you on Monday Night Football instead of Witten, I'm just learning that. Is that public information right there?
Misfire.
So it's really interesting. It's actually a really interesting story. So
no offense to Witten, great football player.
No, I love Witten. He's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
I actually ran into him at a bar in Dallas this year before we called the Cowboys game. I've known him for a long time. He's a great dude. It was actually an interesting story. So there's the 2017 or 2018. I forget what year he took the job. Whatever year that was, before he got that job, I was at the Super Bowl and did some stuff with ESPN for their countdown show, pregame show. And they brought it up to me. Gruden had just left to go back and coach the Raiders. So they said, hey, would you be interested in the job? Would you retire for it? And I was like, I don't know. I said, but I would definitely, take the audition and take the interview or whatever you want to call it and come up to Bristol. So I flew up there, did an entire day with their team, Tessitore, and the whole group, and they put me through the ringer, and then obviously they ended up going with Witten and whatnot, and I continued to play a few more years. But that was a really interesting time. There was the Thursday night package that Fox just got. Then ESPN was looking to replace their booth and redo it. So there was a lot going on in there, and we were in those conversations. Obviously, nothing ever really played out. I continued to play ball, but it was a fun few months though of just kind of learning the inner workings of what TV's really like.
You would have retired to do that, yeah?
I think for the Monday night job or that Thursday job, I think it would have definitely been a conversation. I don't want to sit here and say 100% I would have, but I think if one of those two jobs offers you that platform for a good amount of time, and obviously the money's good, it's definitely something you got to take a minute. At that point, I was like 34, 35 years old. I had just gotten hurt, so I was kind of past my prime, and I don't know if I knew it at the moment, but I was at the time. But yeah, I think it definitely would have been a consideration for sure.
Yeah, okay, so now, obviously, with Troy Aikman getting 17 and a half M's.
Damn.
Hey, good for Troy, by the way.
Troy.
And it's good for all of us, what Troy did. It's good for, yeah, you're clapping. Yeah, it's good for all of us. It is good for all of us what Troy did there. There's obviously openings now at Fox. There's a lot of other digital platforms that are going to get into this game. Amazon was allegedly offering Sean McVay $20 million a year. They just signed Herbie. Shout out to our guy Herbie.
Herbie.
Shout out to Herbie getting that gig. By the way, he's very talented. But your name has to be in all these conversations. Are you excited about that? Or are you just focused on today, focused on the podcast? Like, how do you kind of balance all this with knowing that you should probably be up for one of these jobs that is paying? Hey, these jobs are paying now. We're talking like big money. How do you balance
we're talking
all
like
that?
McAfee money. We're talking McAfee Show money, which is
Well,
real
not
now.
that much. Yeah.
You talk about resetting the bar.
No. Yeah, I mean.
So anyway,
50's a little different, but they only got to work. They only got to work like.
yeah, true. You're working a
One
lot
night
more
a week.
hours.
Well, we're in the middle of the off season right now.
right.
Like, there is no end in sight right now for our show. There is no. We are right in the thick of it right now. We can't wait for football season to come back for us to talk about. But calling games, you still got to travel. You still got to do your research. You're on the road throughout the entire season, and you're the voice of the biggest league on earth. You got to be up in those conversations. You don't have to tell us anything. Obviously, there's probably some leverage and negotiation going on, but it's an exciting time, I assume, for you as a commentator. Yes.
It is. And I think anyone who's doing this would be lying if they said the ultimate goal is to be on one of those crews that calls Super Bowls and has those big playoff moments. That was something when the season ended for us this year, we didn't have a playoff game the way that we'll have our crew would have a playoff game next year. But the way it worked out, we didn't have a playoff game. So all of a sudden now it's playoff ball, it's wild card and divisional round, and you're watching all the other crews. And anybody that's a competitor, it's like no different than when I was a player. The worst day of the year was the day after the Super Bowl. You had to watch some other team and these other guys celebrate and plan their parade, and you're like, sitting there feeling sorry for yourself on the couch. So the same thing now as the commentator. You compare yourself against all these other guys, the games they get to call, the moments at the end of the game that they get to have, and the buzz they get, and you want those moments. I think anybody that competes in any space wants that. So I'm no different. Right, when I set out, I didn't say, "Oh man, I hope I can be the number 2 crew at Fox for the rest of my life." Of course not, and they've known that. That's just not. It's just not the way I'm wired. It's not the way I sought after. I wanted to continue to push this to whatever level I could, and wherever that ends up being, we'll let the chips fall where they may. But obviously, there's a lot of moving parts right now. There's a lot of new players coming into the space, which always makes things interesting. I think it always challenges everybody to continue to get better, and exactly how it all plays out and where the dust settles, I don't have an answer for you right now. But obviously the opportunity to call Super Bowls and the opportunity to be on the biggest platforms and call the biggest moments of the year, who wouldn't want that,
How important has calling games and still being around been for your retirement transition? Because I'm very lucky. I have my boys, so I still have a team feel on a daily basis. I get a chance to talk about football literally every single day. And I talk to some of my other friends that retire, and they're like, I don't want to say lost, but kind of, like almost lost. Most people, whenever they leave the game, are jaded towards the game because they were, for the first time in their life, they were forced out of football, whether it was their decision or somebody else's. Then they kind of come back. How much has media and everything kind of helped your transition process, you think, mentally, as opposed to just being a retired guy out in the middle of nowhere coaching your kids?
Yeah, I think it's been huge. I mean, this fall, for the first time since I was 6 years old, I wasn't worrying about going to a practice, putting gear on, being hurt, being sore. It's the first time in a long time that when I woke up in the morning, I was on my own schedule. Until I had to fly out to the game on the weekend, I could really come and go as I please, take my kids to school, pick them up, go to the gym, it didn't matter what I did. And I think for a while there, and you talk to a lot of guys, and they really struggle, with freedom, and we're so routine oriented, and our whole lives have been kind of structured, and we've played by this calendar of football. The fall you're busy in the season, and then the winter's a little slow. In the spring you have the off season OTAs, and you're kind of, you set your body and your mind is on this weird calendar rotation. The idea that I could be involved in the game, not have to worry about playing, but still be in those production meetings, be in those team meetings, listen to coaches talk, pick their brains, talk with Aaron Rodgers for an hour about his views on offense, or talking with, whoever the players are. It felt like you were back in it, and your juices start flowing, and then you'd get in the booth and you'd get a great game. And, it felt like you were on the sideline. It felt like the conversations you'd have with your buddies in the huddle where you're saying, all right, here's the deal now. We got 2 minutes. Make sure you get out of bounds. If you catch an inbounds, get down, right? The same conversations we'd be reminding ourselves in big moments on the field. I got to now just have those conversations with millions of people watching and just bring a little unique insight into, here's what's being said in that huddle. Here's what's being said to that quarterback and being relayed to everybody else. Like, those were the moments that I really liked, because Nothing replaces being on the field. You know that. Like there's nothing that feels that energy. There's nothing that fills that void. But this was a really close, really fun and fulfilling backup option.
Hey, how about when that national anthem plays too, when you're up in that booth?
Oh,
you know?
it's great.
It is. It really is. Like,
I love it.
Yeah, I agree. Like that was the one thing I called that game. I called a couple college games too. It was like that moment when you're standing on the sideline and the national anthem's happening, the anxiety, the nerves, like, hey, something big's about to happen. And like that is hard to find. And then whenever you're in the booth and you get a chance to experience it, it's like guys get chill. I got chills. I remember like the first time I was back in a stadium. It was cool to feel almost.
No doubt. And because that was always the marker our entire lives. I mean, think back to high school football and they'd play the bootleg, or your band would play it, or play it over these bootleg ass speakers in your high school stadium. You could barely hear it, you know, but it was always the signal, like this is your last moment you have to yourself. And then things are going to get real quick, all the way through the NFL and all the way through my career. So it's the feeling I've always had is anytime I've heard the anthem, it's like, all right, when this anthem's done, it's on, you know, it's live and you got to perform. And it's a little bit of a different performance because the mic's going to turn on and the ball's going to get kicked off and we're going to start talking for 3 hours. But it still gets your juices flowing. It still gets your mind rolling. And that nervous anxiety, that anxiousness was something that I always kind of craved. I always felt like it kind of fueled me. And now it's just doing it in a little bit of a different direction.
It's hard to find, too. It's hard to find everywhere.
No doubt.
There's been some moments where it happens to me. I'm like, oh, man, I got to enjoy this. Like, this moment doesn't happen as much as it used to. Like this whole, hey, you got to go do your job right now. And if you don't, everybody's going to know. There's a certain pressure on there. And by the way, you've stepped up to the plate, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Greg, I mean, honestly, you have absolutely killed it. Ty, go ahead, pal.
Greg, when you played as long as you did, you obviously have so many relationships throughout the league. And I'm not saying you're negative, but a lot of times, like in the booth, you know, guys will just be negative towards players and kind of shit on them. And then with Twitter, maybe, you know, stuff you're saying on Sunday is kind of getting misappropriated. Did you have any situations this year where you had either, like, you know, buddies yours or acquaintances in the league who didn't appreciate how you covered the game, or is that something that you haven't had to deal with and you don't really worry about?
You know, I actually have a funny story, but my approach going in was always going to be, you know, when you're a player, you're always aware. It gets back to you, whether it's through a family or a friend, or you see it on social media or whatever. You know what the broadcasters say about you, and right? Everyone wants things to be said positively. Everyone wants to be told how great they are. That's just human instinct, right? But all you asked for is if you were going to be criticized and you were going to be called out for a mistake, a missed block, a wrong, whatever. All I wanted to know was the guy who was calling me out, you better be right. You better know if you're going to call me out, you better have it right. And if you're right and I screwed up, I can accept that. So my rule in the booth was going to be, I might not always be right. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't pretend to know everything. But if I'm going to really jump a guy and really criticize a guy, I've got to make sure I know I'm right.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever want to do to somebody what I didn't want them to do to me. So I've always tried to treat guys fairly. I've always tried to present, here's what he's most likely being told. Here's what the breakdown was. I'm not in the real business of just like shitting on guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just not my style. Now, if you do it wrong, I got to call you out or else I lose legitimacy with the audience, right?
Yes.
Not everyone could be the best player. Not every route could be the greatest route. Every catch, a Hall of Fame catch. Like, that's stupid. You make everything so sensationalized, then the real big moments don't feel big. But so it's funny, you know, you make little comments and sometimes you don't even realize it. So we called a Green Bay game, a Packer game earlier in the year. I don't remember who they played. And their tight end was in like a 2-point stance off the ball on like the hip of the tackle, and he had a block. I mean, call it Khalil Mack. They might have been playing the Bears. I don't even remember who it was.
D-end, stud D-end.
A stud D-end.
Yeah.
And their tight ends in a 2-point stance. I think it might have been Tunyon. He's up in a 2-point, looking inside at the ball, and he just gets driven back like 3 yards. So on the broadcast, I said, yeah, I mean, obviously his man made the tackle, but when I was a player, if we put this play in, I would have said, no, coach. I'm either on the ball and my hand's on the ground, because if you want me to block this sucker one-on-one, you got to give me a shot, you know. And so fast forward, we had another Packers game. You know, I didn't remember even saying it, right? I was just presenting my perspective of how hard that is for a tight end to block that guy in that position. On the next production call, LaFleur's like, hey, heard you had a problem with my formation. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you didn't like how I had Tunyon in that spot asking in the block. And it took me a second. I didn't even realize what he was talking about. I was like, you know what? You're right. Yeah. I didn't, coach. I said, I'm sorry. As a guy who was asked to do that a bunch, it's hard enough to block that guy with your hand on the ground. Now bring me a yard or two off the ball and put me in a 2-point stance. The guy's going to put his hands on my chest and break my sternum. I said, and he goes, you know what? I appreciate the perspective. He goes, we're going to look into it. I was like, he was being really cool about it. But when he said it, I was like, I don't even know what he's talking about. It took me a minute. So, yes, you do have sometimes things you say. You got to make sure you're careful because coaches care and they listen. Players really care and they listen. And you just don't want to ever disrespect someone who's obviously very good at what they do by being incorrect or being unfairly critical.
That happens with offensive linemen a lot. Offensive linemen get so mad. We all know them about, and Khalil, I assume, is the same way, where some commentators like, well, this offensive line was supposed to slide this way, obviously, and sort it out because, and then I'll get a text from some offensive lineman like, this guy is so fucking wrong. This guy doesn't know any of the blocking, any of that. It's like, is the mic shaded to the left or to the right? Do you know football, Pat? I sent you a screenshot. Is the mic to the left or to the right? It's to the left. Bingo. So they're supposed to sort to the left, not to the right. This guy just buried this offensive line, and they're completely full of shit. It's like,
it's so true.
It's real. Because that's like really Pro Football Focus, too. Like Pro Football Focus.
Don't get me stats. That's a point of contention.
I think they're very good. Hey.
I think they're very good.
Uh-huh. Very good at judging kickers and punters. Very.
Yeah.
Probably.
Why, are you the number one all time?
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
No, they were always fair to me, too. I don't have any personal grudges at all. I think the data collection that they have and all that stuff is fantastic. I just think and I feel this way, again, I just explained it in the booth as someone who has a basic idea of what's going on, but I wasn't in the install. I wasn't in the protection meeting. I wasn't in the run game meeting telling, hey, we got Aaron Donald this week, so we're going to stay real long on this double team, and if the Mike linebacker makes the tackle, great. All of a sudden, he gets graded or on a broadcaster goes, oh, that right guard, Pat McAfee, he's got to come off faster and block the Mike. That's his man. And everyone's like, no, my coach told me I got to block this guy because he's going to wreck the game, right? Like, those are the insights that are very hard to give perspective and to grade unless you really know what they're being asked to do.
The intricacies of football, especially at the NFL level, I don't think people truly appreciate. Like the amount of football IQ that is happening, that separates the good from the great. Like who's somebody you played with that people wouldn't expect just to be like a football genius? For instance, I know you and Cam were around each other for a long time. Cam is obviously very upbeat. That team, Kuechly, Kuechly told us every single...
He's the best.
He told us every single starter that he played against, basically, for an entire season, just rattled it off.
Luke's the best.
Yeah, he's unbelievable, huh?
So certain guys have different qualities. So the two guys you brought up, Cam's on-field instincts and ability to see things in real time and react is why he was so good so long. I don't even know if you coach it, but from the day I met him, he would see things. I'd come back and, we had this thing, if we ever had an incomplete pass or a ball was broken up, I would come back to him and be like, all right, what you got? Like, what'd you see? And he would be like, you cut at 8 yards. I need you at 9, flatter, higher, whatever. And then when you watch the tape, it was like dead on. Like he saw things instinctually really, really fast. Luke memorized the entire game before it started. If you ask Luke before on a Friday at practice, be like, all right, Luke, what are you thinking on 3rd and 4? He's like, all right, well, if New Orleans comes out and they got 3 receivers to the boundary and the back's offset to the field, I know that they want to bring the single receiver underneath me to make sure I get pulled up, and then they're going to run Michael Thomas on the backside dig behind me. So I know I'm going to fool the quarterback by staying, and then I'm going to open up to the field away from the 3 receivers, and I'm going to jump the dig. And I'll be like, all right, cool. You know what I mean? Sounds great. So it was wild. I mean, he'd call out plays, like all those stories of him, all those mic'd up of him where he's saying, Thomas, this guy's pulling back. Like he was the best ever. His brain and ability to process things pre and post snap and in real time, he's the best I've ever been around.
Is that just film study? Is that just absolutely? Obviously, he's a genius as well. He has to be a genius as well. But is it? I don't think there's enough respect given to the amount of time studying everything going on. Every single play, there is a reason. That's why, as a fan, even as a punter on a team, I'm like, man, why don't we run hurry up on offense? Like, hey, let's go. Like, what are we even doing? It seems like it's working. And then I immediately have to go, well, I didn't watch like 200 hours of film like everybody who's making these decisions did. I need to back off. But I don't think that ever gets talked about enough, just how much like football IQ is happening from everybody. They're talking about Aaron Donald being able to read somebody in motion, shading, changing where he's at, which completely changes the entire game. It's just like, that's the difference, I think, between college and the NFL, and it never really gets talked about. We're talking to Greg Olsen. Go ahead, Tone Diggs.
Greg, I think you could have a unique perspective on this. Mike Gesicki, tight end, listed as a tight end for the Miami Dolphins, looks like a tight end, is built like a tight end. He gets tagged as a tight end. He wants to be tagged as a wide receiver for wide receiver money. He lines up in the slot more than anything else. How do you feel about guys who want to be tagged, obviously for wide receiver money, but they're listed, act like a tight end?
I think so. It's really interesting to say that. So this whole conversation started years back with Jimmy Graham. So when he was in New Orleans and they slapped the tag, he appealed it and he challenged it. And I'll never forget the NFL. So all tight ends, we were rooting for him to win, right? Yeah. And the NFL came out with this like arbitrary designation where you're considered a tight end if I think it was like 4 yards or maybe 3 yards. I don't remember the exact number, but they came up with some arbitrary number where they said, well, as long as he's aligned within, I think it was 3 or 4 yards from the tackle, we're going to consider that a tight end. And I remember at the time, this was probably back in like 2014, 15, maybe somewhere around there. I remember at the time thinking, why not 2 yards? Why not 8 yards? Why, like, what an arbitrary number to just like pull out of thin air. And now here, all these years later, we've never really figured out what that designation means. So if I'm Gesicki, I'm fighting like hell too. The difference in the two numbers is significant. And why should we allow a 4 yard? I would love someone to explain to me why 4 yards is the number. It's just an arbitrary alignment. I can't imagine it's based on any sort of formation pattern or any sort of, and over the course of my career, I would line up 4 yards, 2 yards, 1 yard, 10 yards. It was irrelevant to the formation. A lot of it was just based on where the defensive end aligned, where the linebacker aligned. Sometimes I'd want to be further from the tackle to help get a release. Sometimes I'd want to be closer to the tackle so like there was no real differentiation between the formation and how far you aligned from the tackle. That was the NFL's way of obviously sticking it to Jimmy and keeping him as a tight end. But I hope Gesicki wins it. I think it's bizarre in its own right that tight ends don't get paid. If your production is like a wide receiver, why, based on what's listed in the program and what's listed on the roster, instead of it saying WR, it says TE? Who cares?
Yeah. Well,
if you have 1,000 yards or you have where are you in the production of pass receivers? That's where you should get paid.
Yeah, and we all, by the way, Fantasyland, we want him to get paid. Real life, the NFL ain't going to let it happen because once that happens, it becomes an entire. Was that a part of Tight End University, by the way? I think that was.
We didn't talk to you about that when we did the pre.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. I was actually promoting pretty heavily.
T-shirt and everything.
Yeah, I was actually pretty excited about it. But I felt like that was a big time. You guys were all kind of looking out for each other, but also business-wise. Like I feel like a lot of that happened behind the scenes. Is that right? Did you guys kind of chat with each other about business and like kind of forming each other? Because you're in a position that is more important now than it's ever been. It has evolved completely into a much more hybrid wide receiver, not really blocking. I mean, you have to block. You're expected to block. But on offenses, especially now, you are a receiver. You're a dual threat receiver. You should be getting paid more. Was that a part of the Tight End University conversation? And how do you think that pans out?
I think it was. I think all along you always need a certain guys to reset the bar. We joked about it before with the broadcasting stuff, but you need someone to kind of break through the ceiling to reestablish that mark. And for so long, the position kind of lagged behind. And a lot of that was due to where guys get drafted at the position. And when certain guys like Gonzalez and Witten, they dominate for so long, it's very hard to justify someone being paid more than them. So then the salaries kind of flatline. But then all of a sudden, Kittle and Kelsey broke through, and now you see everybody's starting to come up. I mean, you saw the reports that Njoku up in the Browns has been offered $12, $13 million a year. I mean, a couple years ago, that number would be insane. But now all of a sudden, Kelsey and Kittle are making 15, 16.
Hey, let's go.
Yeah.
That's good news. Yeah.
I love it, right? I love it for the tight end. So, yeah, I mean, at the TU part, not so much about like, hey, guys, hold out. We weren't really like colluding to improve the contracts, but there was like a sharing of information and a sharing of appreciation that like, hey, this is a really sought after position. This is a position that if you continue to build your craft and you continue to expand what tools you have and what you can bring to the offense, there's no mystery that the best offenses all have a legitimate guy playing tight end. That's not a coincidence. These offensive coordinators are trying to find these guys. The reality is it's just hard. There's a lot put on your plate. And guys who can do it and guys that can produce at a high level, sort of like a wide receiver, but then also do more of some of the inline physical, inline run game pass protection stuff. They bring a lot of value to an offense. And finally, since the Kittles and the Kelseys have kind of broken through that ceiling, you can see that the salaries and everything, that the franchise tag now is finally over $10 million for a long time. And it was the lowest other than maybe kicker, punter, no offense.
Yeah, I got franchise tag. It was low.
But you know what I mean? So like it's finally starting to move up the ladder a little bit. And as a guy who played it and believes strongly in its value, I'm happy for these guys.
Yeah, and you're born to be a tight end too. They're all freak shows. Yeah. All the tight ends are freak shows, just like you, Greg. Last question here. We appreciate your time. We're talking to Greg Olsen, founder of Audio Rama and the Youth Inc. podcast, out today with Jerry Rice and Michael Gervais, sports psychologist extraordinaire. Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, Reg, you just talked about Kuechly. Another one of your former teammates, Bobby Wagner, is on the move now. Is he kind of not the same, but similar in his preparation?
Yeah, I'm shocked that they let Russ. They're
rebuilding, right? They're rebuilding. They're saying they're not rebuilding, but that is two pillars that you're just.
Those two guys are that team. They're that pulse. They're the heart. They're all the cliches of what guys are for a team. Those two guys are that. Russ on offense and obviously Bobby for a decade on defense. So I was really, really surprised to see them not only move away from Russ, but also in the same day, in the same breath, get rid of who's a Hall of Fame linebacker, in a few years. So, yeah, there's a lot of similar characteristics, just their leadership, their kind of quiet leadership. Bobby's not a big talker. He's not a big hoorah guy, but he's there at every practice. He never misses. He's so consistent. He's durable. So there was a lot of similarities between playing with those two guys. I remember playing against Bobby was always, that was when we used to go play some of those Seattle defenses back in the day, the 2013 to 14 run that they had with Cam Chancellor and Bobby and Michael Bennett and Sherman and Earl Thomas. I mean, it was a gauntlet. It seems like we played them twice a year, every year. So I always just had a ton of respect for Bobby. He's going to have a huge market. If you're a team out there that's a borderline contender, you're selling your soul to try to bring him into your locker room. Not only because he's going to make 130 tackles, but just the presence that he's going to bring to your defense and your team. You need guys like that. There's no amount of money that's too much for guys like that. And I imagine he's going to have teams tripping over themselves to try to sign him here ASAP.
Hey, just like you, whenever your deal is up at Fox, if it ever is up at Fox, we appreciate you so much. Founder of Audio Rama alongside Vince Vaughn, Ryan Khalil, and Mikey Fowler, host of the Youth Inc. podcast, available now. NFL Hall of Fame, future Hall of Famer, Greg Olsen. Thank you, man.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.